Well, good morning. It's just a delight for me to be here. Is it okay if I just stand here? That way I'm part of you. Usually I come once a year to Living Waters, and the reason I come there is because when I first came to America, 1984, I was an electrician in India. We were very poor, and my mom borrowed money to put me in a school so that I could learn English. To stay out of the street fights, because I was a street kid, but also if she said if he learns English, maybe he would get a job, because we were under the British Raj, or British rule. So in that sense, she said, okay, they'll at least employ the guy, he won't end up on the streets. What they didn't realize is that the school they put me in to learn English happened to be a Christian school. And I didn't like Christians, to be honest, but I couldn't get away from Jesus. And they, twice a week, did this assembly in which they just read passages from the gospel about who Jesus was and how, he made the difference. Long and short is, one of my friends invited me for an evening service. Now, I liked Bollywood movies a lot. Any of you are familiar with Bollywood? Okay, the Indian movies. They usually hit each other, fall on a haystack, or dance around a tree and things like that. But I liked it those days growing up, go sit in a tent and watch these matinees. And this friend said to me, you should come to our church. I said, if you come for the movies, then I'll come to church. I said, who's going to go to church after seeing a movie? So I thought he's definitely going to forget. He didn't. So I went that evening, and for the first time, I heard the simple gospel of Jesus. I was in 8th grade at that time, or standard we call it, and I knew there's some catch. I mean, how do you get everything for nothing? I said, these missionaries, and they're mainly British at that time, they seem to promise heaven and forgiveness of sin and all that stuff, and all I need to do is pray. So my karma mind, karma is kind of reap what you sow stuff, cause and effect. Check your credit karma, by the way. But, you can see how new age this country has become, really. And I'm not joking. I mean, it's taken over here. But anyway, I thought, but then there was one thing that hit me, and that's the concept of kiruba, grace. I could not get away from that. We just finished 4th of July, but freedom's not free. Somebody paid for it. And that clicked for the first time. This is not just like get everything for nothing. Somebody paid it for me. So that great exchange was actually what brought me to Christ, and that we can't earn our salvation. And I got so upset when we had so many gods in India, and these Christians dared to call him Father. I said, what do you think? You got a monopoly on God? He's your dad or something? I mean, we had hundreds of gods. Islam has 99 names for Allah, and Hinduism has 33,000 gods. And we got from snake god Nagaraj to monkey god Hanuman to the elephant god Ganesha. I mean, we got gods for everything. And you call him Father? And then I realized that faith or religion is not a ritual, it's actually a relationship. And that is where I started my journey. I mean, that night was the night that it dawned on me that there's this grace factor. But honestly, like a typical Asian, for me it was a process. I had a very skeptical mind, challenging and questioning things. But through it all, the truth sets you free. It really is. You don't have to defend it. I teach apologetics, but really, you don't have to defend truth. Just give it. It's like a lion, Simha. It's not afraid of anything. It can defend itself. And so that's put me for the journey. And long and short, I was an electrician. They sent me to Stuttgart in Germany, and I trained for Bosch, a company, probably you're familiar with Bosch products. And they sent me back to their company in India, and I worked there for 4 years. Now, at the end of this, I wasn't at the end, it was in the middle of that something important, the O.P. Tyagi bill, the Hindu fundamentalists came in power. It still is in power now in India, the BJP, the Bharatiya Janata Party. And missionary visas were not renewed, and those who were there for less than, I think, 10 years were all kicked out of India. Now look at the miracle of God. I'm in this church. They just told me I'm saved to serve, so I didn't need any ordination. I joined the Baptist church because the Anglican church took a long time to lay your hands, on anybody. And this church was, quickly and like, hey, go and tell everybody. But I said, I like that church, they don't put you through the mill and, get your all the, stuff to go through those things. So I said, okay, I became a Baptist very quickly. Did I tell you the difference between a Baptist and a terrorist? You see, you can negotiate with a terrorist. So now I realized that a little later. But for that time it was like, hey, let's go with the flow, and I did the Taoism stuff. But, there were two people in this end who wanted to come to India. There's a college called Word of Life Bible Institute in New York. And Jack Wurtson, how many of you have heard of Jack? Okay, Jack Wurtson wanted to come to India. So he goes to the embassy and he says, I want to go to India. And they said, what's the purpose of your visit? He said, I want to win those Indians to Jesus Christ. And they denied him a visa right off the thing. He's like, I'm American, what is this? They said, so you really, it doesn't matter who you are, you can't go because this is an Indian consulate. We issue the visas. And we will not issue a visa to go and convert those Indians to Jesus Christ. So he was mad. He said, I know people, and Jack was influential those days. He said, I can get a visa and all that. Comes back, and the person on the board at that time was an evangelist called Wendell Calder. Anyone heard of Wendell Calder? All right. Blame him. If anything goes wrong tonight with me this morning, that's Wendell's fault. So he tells Jack, if you can't go to those people, why don't you bring some young people here? Put the fire of God in their heart, the Bible under their belt, send them back to reach their own. And Jack said, well, that's an idea. 37 years ago, I was the young man that Jack Wurtson and Wendell Calder brought to New York to study. I'd never studied the Bible. I was trying to learn English. And I could not believe I can go to a place and all I do is study the Bible. I was like, oh my goodness, this must be heaven, This is amazing. So I memorized 19 books. I just love the Bible so much. I was like, imagine this, that's all I got to do. When you're an electrician and you work for the Germans, I'm telling you, they just, their middle name is Pharaoh, I think. They just, they don't even give you straw to burn those bricks. They're like, get it done, But it was such a blessing. The Americans were so much more friendlier, big-mouthed, of course, compared to the British, And the British were like reserved. They only answer if you say something, and they don't even talk to you in a bus stand. I was so lonely in England. But come to America, they're like, hey, what's your name? How much is the shirt? And like, do you work in computers? No. I was like, okay. I must tell you something. The other day, somebody, I teach at Liberty, the guy's trying to get me to do their missions conference, I don't know, in Kentucky or something. And it's like, you call and they're not there, you leave a voice message, and you call, they're not there, you leave it's actually phone stalking, and you've never said a word. But eventually, I got through to him, and I said, Kirk, and I started talking, and he hung up on me. I said, fine, if you want me to be your speaker, you hang up and forget it. So then later on in the afternoon, it's ringing, and then someone said he's on the phone. So I picked it up. And he said, Dr. Chris, oh, it's wonderful. It's so nice to catch you eventually. I said, Kirk, I called you, and you hung up on me. He said, was that you? I said, why? He said, I thought it's one of those Dell computer guys trying to sell me. I almost hung up on him. And then he has the audacity to say, all you Indians sound alike. Man, I tell you, there must be some Title IX or something to sue. Everybody's suing everybody. I might as well, brown lives matter. Come on. So it was such a situation. But anyway, that's the background that I began to study the Bible. Now tell me, folks, you know how many people are in India? 1.4 billion. Now, what's the probability that I, from a street kid, should be selected to study the Bible? So I studied it, went to Tennessee Temple, got a degree, went back, planted 2 churches, got beaten up and all that. And no book I read told me what to do when they beat you up and you're lying on the floor with blood, I had these deacons, and they had a spirituality. Go and claim the land in Jesus' name. So early morning like this, we went. There was a land. We had outgrown the church and the building. It was actually my house we were meeting in. So I'm praying. And while I'm praying, I just got this big blow on the side of my mouth, and I was bleeding. I fell down. The Hindus wanted to just get rid of me. That's how I started church planting, literally with blood, sweat, and tears. Because the elders, those guys ran away. I mean, I was like, are you kidding me? So later on, I met him. I said, Prabhakar Rao and Vijay Kumar. I said, what happened? They said, Pastor, we went to get help for you. I tell you, that's how I started. I made my members say, Pastor, we are behind you, I mean, far behind you. Or even worse, they're with you in spirit. I like, bring your bodies. Okay. But it was very lonely. It was very, very lonely. And let me tell you this. One of the things I'm going to share today is about the pandemic. Maybe answer issues on theodicy. If God is in control, is he really in control? I mean, it's almost 2 years now. What does corona mean? Sorry? What is the word corona? See, one good thing when English is not your language, you go into etymology, you start studying, well, where did that come from? You know what corona means? Yeah. Who said it? It means crown. Like cranium, corona. Corona literally means crown. And if you look at the magnified version of the virus, it does look like a crown. Did you see the crust? Like the queen's crown. It's reigning and ruling. And questions of who is in control. Theodicy is basically the issue of justice. If God is so loving, then why in the world does he allow evil to prosper? And if he's so powerful, why can't he control it? Haven't you thought that? Not just about the coronavirus, maybe about the big C. We've been talking about cancer with two people at the back. And you know what? I've had some very disillusioning moments where, the Yancey question, where is God when it hurts? I have been disappointed with God. I told Pastor Kirk, I'm not going to teach or preach today. I got some slides, and in case someone wants to pray specifically, I brought some things. I just want to facilitate a discussion. I want us to talk to each other because we're all Christian leaders in our own rights, so to say. And these are difficult times. Let me put it very bluntly. Morally, I was with David Kinnaman. David Kinnaman works in Bana. Any of you heard of the Bana group for statistics? Okay. So I was with him. We were doing a presentation in California a few weeks ago. And did you know during the pandemic, domestic violence has increased, escalated, even though we're all hunkered down? Did you know during the pandemic, forms of addiction, from pornography all the way to drug addiction? Did you know depression is so high that people are cutting? I'm talking about Liberty University, forget the non-Christian. People are suicidal today because they're hopeless. We were born for community. Mother Teresa put it right. I remember her saying, the most dreaded disease in the world is not HIV and AIDS. It's loneliness and despair when we have no hope. And so I think this is where I really believe that churches should be bearers of hope if we don't have hope during the pandemic, who has? You know why people, did you hear the word panic in pandemic? Isn't it? It's almost embedded there, isn't it? The word panic. People panic. And it goes back to the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus says, be anxious for nothing. The reason anxiety kicks in is when there's ambiguity. And we are Americans, right? Did you know Americans drive more than they fly? You know why? We want to be in control on the road. Even if I kill myself, I kill myself, The other day I saw a cartoon. It was so funny. I'm going back on flight now, and I have to go to Dearborn, Michigan to speak at the largest mosque on Monday, so pray for me. But it's very interesting. I saw this cartoon, and everybody's strapped in the aeroplane, and there's this voice that comes up and says, this is your pilot speaking. I will be working from home this morning. So crazy things happen, and it didn't happen. But you think like, what do we do? How are we coping? So I want to basically tell you some of the trends and issues that I sense are happening. That's the center part, like I'll take 15, 20 minutes for that. But I want to begin by bringing us back, and Pastor Kirk kind of did that as a splash on that page. Is his last command still our first concern as the church? I remember sharing with him, the church is the only organization that exists for its non-members. You say, but we are members only. That's a club, not a church. And I think these are times, if we get our philosophy, the reason why we do what we do, and if we create an ambience, a welcome. I love what I see. I mean, I haven't been here for 2-3 years now, I think. I love this. I was telling Lisa, even in Scripture, aesthetics and truth, beauty and truth go together. And when there's something that's welcoming and winsome, people want to be a part of it. And I think we have a great opportunity to expedite the Great Commission. I also have some very disturbing trends that I want to share with you about the American church. Again, I use my Indian passport to go. For those of you who do not know me, I do what most others don't, won't, and can't. The only thing Jesus asked us to do, who can tell me? What's the only verb in the Great Commission? Correct. I mean, what's the word that Jesus used? There's only one word. There's only one verb in the Great Commission. Metatheis. It's not even evangelize, by the way. There is no word euangelion in the Great Commission. It's metatheis, make disciple or disciple. You know the only group he asked us to make disciples of? It's the word panta tha ethne, all nations. Did you hear the word ethne in Greek? What is that? What's the English word that comes to your mind? Ethnic or ethnicity. What's that? It has nothing to do with geopolitical nations. There wasn't even Canada or America those days. So what did Jesus mean by nations? Not geopolitical nations. He meant ethno-linguistic groups who have never heard his name. That's what ethnos means. Now, I know we target countries and like, who's in South Sudan? Right now, you need to pray for South Sudan, for Ethiopia, for Myanmar. I've got people killed in these countries as well. In India, where I'm from, just the last from last summer to I have a list of 2,000 Christian workers who died in the COVID. Directly COVID related. My own younger brother had the coronavirus, COVID-19, the Delta variant. He was admitted in the hospital, there wasn't beds. I had to call people I knew in Bangalore, where I'm from. I had to send dollars to literally, well, call it bribe or incentive, to get my brother a bed. And he was on oxygen dying. My own sister, who's diabetic, only 2 weeks ago, got her first vaccine. There's a queue. It's not they don't have access to that. I mean, we have the luxury to fight whether we want it or not. You know, people are dying without it in the rest of the world. So I want to raise some issues. By the way, I am not Republican or whatever. What's the other group? Or Democrats or what? I know I teach at Liberty, but I am nothing to do with politics. I steer clear out of it. Now, I understand, and I'm not John Yoda. I think Christians should be involved in nation building. I'm not against that. I was talking to Johnny Linehan. But I think sometimes you miss the whole point that we belong to a world that do not have certain luxuries that we have in the United States. And I just want to open a window and allow you to ask questions. It's real. Corona is reigning. But I'm here to say, our God reigns. He really does. I checked this morning. He's still on the throne. And no, really, I read the last chapter. Jesus wins. So we don't have to get all upset and try to revolution and change the world. God is still in control, not Corona. Let me give you a tagline for tonight or this morning. Listen, the coronavirus will not last forever. The Christian will. That's what we need to be affirmed. Do I belong to the eternal gospel? Am I going to, do you have that Larry the cable guy show? When I first came, they had that Larry the cable guy. And he said, get her done. I'm here to say, get her done. I mean, with the Great Commission, we got to do it any which way. It should be our first concern. And I met two of you who've been students. One, is it online? At Liberty, she's heard my tapes and all. I mean, I teach 600 students a day. And this introduces the second major concern I have, which is not medical and how we can thrive, not just survive during the pandemic, but I think we have a deep moral problem in America. Last July, August specifically, I handed in my resignation. I just wanted to resign. I just wanted to go work with Krista. I didn't want the other one. 3 people whom I worked very closely with. I mean, one of the greatest musicians, kind of like Carl Lintz kind of. The other guy, I think most of you know, I traveled every year and spoke annually in Marietta with Ravi Zacharias. We were colleagues. We were the ones first to go to the Balkans and present it to the 10 nations when they were killing each other during the Kosovo issues. Ravi was very close to me. Of course, now he's dead, you can't defend anything. My own employer, Jerry Fowell Jr., I don't know, if you don't know, don't worry. I didn't even know what a threesome is. I had to ask my wife, what in the world is that? She said, for all your education, your PhDs, your permanent head damage, you don't need it. You know, but sometimes innocent is bliss, and I don't know what this stuff is. But I tell you what, it's not good. The rest of the world is looking at American missions and saying, you know what, we don't want that. We really don't want the gospel that comes with that muck. And I'm here to just say, we need revival. We really do. We need that contrite hearts. And I think if at all God has allowed, and I believe God can even send. Who sent the plagues in Egypt, by the way? Who did? Yahweh. So don't think that, oh, you know, God is sovereign and he can't bring any judgment. God can do what he wants. That's what sovereignty means. And don't sit and fight or play God. We've done that for long enough in this country. I really think we need to at least, you know what the coronavirus has taught us? We're not in control. Am I right or wrong? I mean, look where the economy was. We were blowing our last trump, okay? We were like, okay, we got it all together. And God sends a small little virus. Everything comes to a screeching halt, isn't it? I live like 25 minutes from the treasury. I don't know if there's anything in it, but anyway, that's the treasury. And you know, but you think about what would we do? Another 45 minutes is Johns Hopkins from where I live. I've got colleagues who work there taking devotions there. But let me ask you, all the medical science and research, what can they do? Nothing. The resources, the technology, the resources in terms of what we are finding. You know why the corona is scary? Let me tell you. People compare it to the Spanish flu or the other H1N1 that came. Listen, this is unique. I'll tell you why. Why it's so petrifying. Because we don't know how it is infecting people. It's asymptomatic, which means you can actually be a carrier and have no symptoms. I wear a mask all the time. You know why? Not because I'm afraid, because I love my neighbor and I love my family. It has nothing to do with, well, am I following some political party? I just want, and this is real. I'm going to show you people who died. My own brother, I told you, and sister in hospital. So this is not like, you know, some kind of a conspiracy theory that somebody put some G5 in my little vaccine that writes 666 and G, you know. Listen, there's more to this. This is a medical issue. And I'm telling you, this is a great opportunity for us to be missional. Because there's only one thing that casts out all fear, and that's perfect love. And if we don't love our neighbors during this time, who will? I mean, I was in the airport last month. This is amazing. It just shocked me. Because now they make you wear the mask if you're going on the airport because they need people coming there. But we're all wearing masks. This guy wouldn't wear a mask. And so the officer asked him to step back and said, sir, we can give you a mask. You have to wear it if you're going to travel. He said, I got up this morning, and the last time I checked, I'm American. And I'm saying, you know, when you travel the world, you come back, and that is arrogance. I don't know. I mean, I just feel so bad. I mean, we have to come as Christians to realize that sometimes we do things not for ourselves. I mean, we are so much into rights and fighting for our rights and privileges. You know, the rest of the world don't have rights and privileges. Or shall I say, even if you're a Christian, you're actually a debtor. Nobody owes us anything. We owe them the gospel. Think about that. The early Christians didn't go fighting for rights. They laid down their lives, like the one who called them. What is Christianity going to look like? Oh, by the way, that's my family. Dorothy works in Georgetown University. They sent her to do some research. And is that Blake? Yeah. Hey, man, hello. Hey, how are you? Good to see you. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't recognize you. We have a program called God in the Living Room, and Blake used to throw that up on Sunday evenings with Jerry and myself. Good to see you, man. I've never met you in person, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the first time, I guess.
Yeah, you disappointed? Or? So anyway, Dorothy works for Georgetown, and she's, I don't know what, just above my pay grade. She's an instructional designer or something. She writes curriculum for the professors in Georgetown. And she's also finishing a doctorate at Baylor in instructional design. So that's Dorothy. You know, when I was young, I dreamt I'll be surrounded with pretty women. So see what God did. But anyway, this is Aletheia. Aletheia means truth, and that's charis, means grace. You know charis, right? Yeah, so that's full of grace and truth. I balanced that a lot. I came back. I was trained by John MacArthur and all those guys. I went. I knew all the answers. Didn't know what the question was when I went back to India. I was so truthful, I was hurtful. I was Bible bashing everybody because my daughters are Aletheia. Speak the truth. Let it set people free. I gave them the truth, and that's why I got beaten up. I told you that. So the next daughter, I called her Grace. It was like, because in John, that's how Jesus came, full of
Truth and grace.
grace and truth. You need both, isn't it? Because truth without grace can be hurtful, and grace without truth is flimsy. So you kind of need both. So that reminds me. She works for Elderman, the largest advertising company in the world. She was part of the Friends reunion. I don't know if you've seen that show. Oh, you're Baptist, you don't see that. Okay. But she works for one is digital and the other is medical. I think I'm mental by now. But that's my family for those of you who are praying. Just an update about what they're doing. Hopefully next year, Dorothy will travel with me to Maine when I come to Living Waters. And she could be here in some of the meetings. Both our daughters, she finished MCAT, so she's kind of, the whole pandemic threw that whole thing in a monkey wrench in it. And Karis is now working downtown DC. So I was listening to a show where they were asking the Pentecostal pastor and the Anglican pastor and the Jewish rabbi, when does life start with this pro-abortion and all that stuff, pro-life and abortion. So the Pentecostal pastor said, he said, what do you mean? What a question. When does life start? I go to the hospital, my wife gives birth to a baby, that's when life starts. I say it right there. So the Anglican priest said, actually, he said, when the sperm fertilizes the zygote in the embryo, he says, that's when life starts, at conception. And they asked the Jewish rabbi, he said, when does life start? Well, he said, when the kids leave home and the dog dies. He said. So it's all perspective. Here's the biblical thing that I want to leave with us. The next slide for me. Good. Sorry, it's all coming together. But let me just leave this passage with us and then raise questions or even issues that I find we can talk about. Is that okay? And so have this in mind. Someone turn to Acts, if you would, if you got your Bibles or your devices, whatever you use. Acts chapter 14. Verse 21 to 24. Who would like to read that for us? I'm going to use that as what they call a biblical basis for missional strategy during the pandemic. More than anything, I have learned what is happening here. Acts chapter 14 and verse 21. 21 to 23. Who would like to read that for us? Go ahead, Pastor.
They preached the gospel in that city and won a large number of disciples. Then they returned to Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch.
Okay, we'll pause there. And they preached the gospel. Now, what do we get from that word? What concept? Where's my student? Where do we get euangelion, to proclaim good news? Yeah, what's the word? What are we talking about? Evangelization or evangelism, okay? See, evangelism is the entry point. It's not the end all. Do you all get that? The first thing they proclaimed the gospel. So I want you to think, because of the pandemic, we're not changing the message, but do we need to change the mode? Think of a fellow like me. I work in 4 pockets. My primary work is in India, Pakistan, Bhutan, and Nepal. So I do that, my country in a trilogy. Then I come to the Mekong Valley, and I do Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. And then I go far east, I go to China, I go to Vladivostok in Russia, and I work in North Korea. So I've been 3-4 times into North Korea. Then my home office, head office for Christa is in Spain, Malaga, Spain. But we have the largest deportation of refugees in the world. Used to be through Germany, from Africa, but now it's through Malaga, from Morocco. So I work in that little gap. And then on my way, where I studied in England. So that's basically what I do. I try to do all 12 countries a year. You say, how do you do that? I teach Tuesday and Thursday at Liberty University. Now, I'm really blessed that they allow me to do that, 600 students, 4 classes back to back. So that's how I do that. A lot of it has now gone online. But most of the weekend, so if I take a Thursday off, Dr. Terry Smith, you know what happens? I actually get 10 days. So I can actually make a trip to Haiti and come back if I need to. But we professors are really good. Did you know that we get 4 months holidays? Really good. I mean, maybe our salaries are not good, but did I tell you the difference between a professor and a large pepperoni pizza? No? Well, a large pepperoni pizza can feed a family of 4. So I think this whole thing about being able to go is a real blessing. But I really believe we need to gossip the gospel. That sounds sacrilegious, but think about it. How do I gossip the gospel right here in Bangor? I think gone are the days where we put a wedge between the so-called secular and sacred. Now God is using, He is raising up Esther's, Nehemiah's, Daniel's in political scenes. I'm not a political guy, but we need political people to take a stand, because that's why evil triumphs when good people don't do anything. So I agree with that. And even, I mean, the first year I taught at Liberty 8 years ago, one of my students was Miss America runner-up. She wasn't even good looking. No, she was. But you know, I mean, Miss America runner-up, I was able to teach her theology. Now, can you see me on the catwalk? You can? That'll be an ugly scene. But anyway, but I am learning to walk like that, you know. But, I mean, I can never go to some places that my students can, isn't it? See, you've got to think exponentially. Am I going to do something great for God? Or am I going to pour into others who will do things bigger and better than I would ever do? Right now, Evan is in Vietnam, my student. And he's using his mechanical skills to actually run these youth program centers. I tell my young people, don't change your major. Tell me what it is. I'll tell you how to be a missionary with it. Because some countries you can't go as a Bible teacher and a pastor, and you can't. Vic walked into my class. He's from Chicago. I mean, he was a pimp and peddled drugs for years. He came simply to argue with me. He wasn't even signed. He was auditing that class. Huge black strapping guy. By the end, God changed his heart, and he came with me to Nepal. It's funny because we couldn't even get a passport for him, Jay, because, you know, once you're convicted, it's not easy to get a... And that guy said, do I need a passport to go to Nepal? I'm like, my goodness, don't tell them you're at Liberty, you know. I mean, it's you know, basically, I need a passport, you know. I'm American, really. Okay, so he comes to Nepal, and he finds coffee beans. And you know what fair trade is? You know, we don't get any commission, it goes directly to the growers. Vic Stanley owns the two largest restaurants, coffee shops, the Coffee Bean and others in Lynchburg. And all those products come from farmers in Nepal. He's one of the biggest missionaries I've ever had. He's doing BAM, business as missions, we call it. We've got to think creatively. If we're going to reach our generation, that's why I'm here. I don't know the answers, but you do. I can tell you what to do in Cambodia. I just wrote a track called Stop the Traffic, because the last set of people we took from the World Cup, these young girls, some of them are like 11 and 12 years old, they traffic. But we gave them, Cindy, sewing machines, you know, to learn, give them. Now they're into computer science, Cindy. It's very fancy, like, Dr. G, I need a laptop when you come. I said, I don't own Walmart or something. And what do you mean it's cheaper in America? Can you bring me how many computers can I bring these girls? And I'm like, no, I can't do that. But they are so eager, they're smart. God's doing some great things around the world. But number one is the entry point. Listen, you may not be able to cross the 7 seas like I do, but you can cross the street. You know why? This is America. You say, what's that got to do with anything? We are a nation of immigrants. We get gravitated to our comfort zones. We are not going to the nations, are we? Are we all intentionally going to the nations? We're not. Listen to this. The nations are coming to us. So you don't have to cross the seas. You may have to cross the street. 7 miles from where I live, in South Riding behind the airport, is a place called Manassas. The largest deportation of Ethiopians outside Addis Ababa in Ethiopia is right down the road. I drive 7 miles. I don't need to go to some Gaza Strip and reach some. They're right there. The DC, the Dallas airport, employs the largest number of Ethiopians. Now, do you know what I'm saying? We've got to rethink how to reach the world, because the nations are in our neighborhood. So churches should be able to say, how am I going to gossip the gospel? It is not the end game, it's the entry point. Let Jesus take care of the end game. But are we part of the end? Have we engaged where we are? Does that make sense? Next verse. Who's reading? There you go.
So then they returned to Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch.
All right, let's pause there. I want to just mention this. All right, what is the product of evangelism? What happened? Look at that verse. They came and preached the gospel in the city, and what happened as a result? They what? Made many disciples. Isn't that the Great Commission? I call it the grave omission. Nobody's doing it. But when you think about it, discipleship is a byproduct. Again, you don't have to fight. I'm into evangelism, I'm into discipleship, I'm pastoral, and I'm pioneering. Listen, we're all in this together. Disciple making was given to the church, the body of Christ. But it's a byproduct. If every one of us are gossiping the gospel, what comes out of that? People will say, how do I follow Jesus? So somebody has to find them and fetch them. Then we bring them to Pastor Kirk, and he flocks them and feeds them. But unless somebody finds them and fetches them, pastors can't flock and feed. Do you all understand? Pastors are actually there to equip the church. The church ought to do the work of the ministry. Do you understand? We think we pay the pastor and he should build the church. That's not biblical. I'm sorry. No wonder pastors are giving up, because they're like, I can't do all that. Well, they were never called to do all that. I'm not joking. Carter Rizzo, the only thing a pastor does is to equip. We get the word equipment and give you the tools, you get the job done. Does that make sense? So the normal church think, oh, we got a great pastor, we're going to grow this church. Well, the pastor actually helps us grow the church. Last time I checked, sheep produce sheep. Shepherds don't. Don't try it. You know, sheep produce sheep. Where do we think that a shepherd's going to come and produce sheep? I think, again, I really think missions, you need to rethink. Just because you got a celebrity pastor who's going to have a mega church impact, that is not, I don't believe that's the will of God. I'm being very honest with you. Discipleship is when every member has a missional mentality. This is my ministry. I'm going to claim my piece of the pizza. Amen. Are you hungry already? All right. So, I mean, we do. I'm being honest with you. This is something I'm thinking. Now, here's where I'm going to relate this to the pandemic. You know what I've learned? This is painful. I am dispensable. Now, for a leader who is the director for leadership development in 18 countries. That is most humbling. The last 2 years, God assured me, I don't need you. You know, people, at least in my church, Capital Baptist, where I'm a missions pastor there in D.C., it's very interesting. Some of the most problematic issues we're having is with people who had these high positions, you know. I don't know, I don't ask them what they are. I can tell you, but I'll have to shoot you after that. I was like, no, I don't need it. So, you know, they have these high positions, and then they take retirement. They are the most problematic. You know why? They have what they call redundancy. They don't know what to do. They come to church and they think I can run the church like I ran the corporate office, and it's not working. And if you don't give them something to do, that's worse. They'll climb the walls or something. Because we have a wrong understanding of the division of labor, of how we are the body. Every member of the body should move like bones and ligaments, and the whole is built up. That's biblical. Ephesians 4, verse 11 to 15. That's how the body is built up. Again, I hope you're thinking with me. I know I'm a missionary, but I'm telling you, Jesus didn't say, I will build my Christian university, did he? He didn't even say, I will build a mission organization. He said, I will build my... That's the only thing Jesus promised to build. If you're not part of the church, you're not part of the body of Christ. I don't like these independent ministries who are not attached and committed and accountable to the church. When I almost resigned, the only thing that kept me is when the head of my school personally visited me. He said, Gnanakin, I was going through that form you filled up, and you said your desire to come to Liberty is because you love the Bible and you love students and you love to bring the two together. Is that still true? I said, it is true. And he looked at me, he said, well, what's stopping you from doing that? Keep your eyes on Jesus, not on Ravi. Don't keep your eyes on people. Let us down. That's what the pandemic has taught me, that I am indispensable, and you know what else? People will let you down. The higher you go, the lonelier it is at the top. You think like, oh, he's got so many friends on Facebook, he's popular, everybody likes him, he's a great... You ask these leaders, they are very lonely people. I'm going to a church, 2 churches, and pastors called me this week. 2 of them have stepped down. They're like, you know what? I'm just tired of fighting, trying to please all our members. Should we do this? Should we open up in person? You know, they're like, you know what? Thank you. I can go and fix car tires or something. Pastors are giving up. That's why I'm so refreshed to see this. Please don't give up. Lisa, just stand next to him and help him out. I mean, I'm telling you, pastors need encouragement today like never before. Is that true? Because they are hurting. You look at them on the outside, they're like, we got it together, we're growing. Inside, they're struggling. So many decisions. That Barna report shows us that the attrition, people leaving the ministry, is the highest. Bible colleges are closing down. Students don't even want to go to school anymore. Bibles, what are they going to do after that? So they're looking for employability. We need to really wake up and look at our infrastructure. Are we doing it right? You're like, we're working very hard and long. Who's not? Everybody's working hard and long. But are we working right and smart? There's a difference. And this is where you need some stock taking and say, let's hold back. Now, post-pandemic. And I'm telling you, if you want to change anything, do it now, because people have gone, they won't even know the difference. So when they come back, no, I'm not joking, you got to change now, because you get those oldie goldies and like, oh, we've never done it this way. They die, they go to their grave, and the gravestone say, we never did it this way, So the only constant is change. If you don't change, you're going to let down. Let me also say this while I'm at this. There's 4 areas research shows we've got to change. And I'm going to offend some older folk here. Please forgive me in advance. The media is the message. So get used to this stuff. My I-12, everything. There's only 3 things I look when I travel. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Father is my wallet, right? All the credit cards. Son is my passport or any kind of ID to get me there. There's only one way. And honestly, everything else, things I see and don't see, is all on this. My flight out of Bangor is in my passport here. I just click it, it's automatically updated. And the miles I have, they bump me up because nobody's going first class from Bangor. I got to go. I never even asked for that. It's all here. Those are the only 3 things I check. People are downsizing. Did you know that? Less is more today. So we've got to think, do we really need all this structure and fancy setup to be the church? Where are we investing? Did God ask us to invest in buildings and bodies and bucks? Or did he say, listen, be a blessing and bring them into the kingdom? You see, I'm not saying we don't need that. The pandemic has taught us we don't. I saw another cartoon the other day. Satan's on one side and Jesus on the other side, and Satan's like, nah. I stopped every church in the world. I closed it down. And Jesus is saying, I opened one in every house. Now tell me, which is more New Testament? You see what I'm saying? Here's my theology. You don't go to church. You are the church wherever you go. Now, what does that look like? What does missions look like for the Rock or the Bangor Baptist or Cross Point? What does missions look like if that's what it is? So evangelize, and those you evangelize becomes, and they went back to that city. You know which city they went back to? Lystra. Did you hear that? What happened in Lystra? Huh? Not the kind of stone you're thinking of. But he got, you're like, why did I ever sit here? Paul was physically stoned. And by the way, not just, he was left to death. He's like, that guy's dead. Is he breathing? No, let's move on. Now tell me, how many of you will get up and go back to that same place? Stone me, part 2. That doesn't even sound reasonable, does it? But that's why he's the Apostle Paul and you are not. Because he understood the cost of discipleship, to use Bonhoeffer's term. He knew that this is not just a cause, there's a cost. I have learned that during the pandemic. Yes, church is a great cause, but most people are not willing to pay the price. He goes right back. You know why he goes back? Because he realized that just preaching the gospel is not the end for what church is. What did he do?
Strengthening the disciples and encouraging them to remain true to the faith.
Tell me, isn't this what we need during the pandemic? I hope you've used this time. Actually, for me, don't take this the wrong way. I am so glad for the pandemic. I have spent more time with my daughters than I've ever spent since I got married. I'm being honest with you. It's funny when you come down and like, Dad, you're not going anywhere? I was like, am I supposed to go somewhere? Oh, Dad, you're still here? They're like surprised to see me at home. But tell me, what virtue is there if you win the world and lose your family? Am I right? I don't think Jesus is going to say, hey, how many PhDs did you get, Gnanakin? What was the last book you wrote for Zondervan? Or how many churches did you... I think he may ask me, did you love your wife? Did you spend time with your girls? I think so. The slate of questions that we think that Jesus is going to ask is going to be different. So I'm asking you, we can talk about this now. What does mission look like? Don't you think you need to start at the home? Make the home your primary parish. We've been hunkered down anyway. Don't you think God's going to tell you something? Well, he's taught me something. I'm going and winning people in the Annapurna range in Nepal. I'll just show you that in a minute. But you know what? My own daughters are marriageable. And they're dating. Now I carry guns now. No. But you know, and I'm like, okay, I got to spend time because there was a time when they needed me and I wasn't there. Now I need them and they don't want me. I'm being honest with you. You know what I'm talking about? Parents? Yeah. I mean, you don't have time for kids, and then you decide, I'm going to spend time. And they're like, I don't need to spend time. I don't have time for you. So do it when you can. Have you learned that in the I'm learning that. Sorry if this is not a missional talk, but really, that is missions. Home missions. And we should be involved in it. Strengthen. Paul went back to the very place that they tried to kill the guy. He says, you know what? I forgot one thing. What is it? Oh, I forgot to write the third epistle to Corinth. No, listen. You know why he went? He said, there are some people there who are down in their hearts. I want to go and inject some courage in them. That's where we get the word encourage, the word enthusiasm, to inject God in people. Entheos, to put God back. Again, I'm sorry this is not a very missional message, but I really think we should start where we are. That's what I've learned in the pandemic. People need to be strengthened and encouraged. They're discouraged so much. I told you the problems that are domestic violence are escalating. And the church has never addressed that. I mean, I don't know, this whole thing about cutting, I didn't know it's so common. Anorexia and bulimia, I'm now doing research in that. The biggest problem with teenage girls now, did you know that? Anorexia and bulimia. They want to look like, I don't know, Angela Jolie or something, I don't know what they want. They hate themselves. See what's happening? Because everywhere the media is saying, you're not good enough, you're not significant, you're so insecure if you don't have this product, that product. When will we be satisfied? These are messages the church needs to address at some stage, and it's missional. So they evangelized. Those they evangelized became disciples of Jesus. But once they became disciples, not only evangelize and baptize, you stabilize. You build them up in the faith, isn't it? The article, pistos, the faith. Not just, be nice, believe, and you like the latest song. No. They're saying, listen, be established, firm foundations. And Paul said, I want to do that. But there's one more thing he did. Go ahead.
We must go through many hardships to enter the kingdom of God, they said.
How many televangelists preach that part? Have you heard that on the televangelist? Through much tribulation, you're going to enter the kingdom of God. They're like, send your money, you'll be healthy, wealthy. And the prosperity gospel is like big. Where are the faith healers during the pandemic? Did you get any recent? Have you wondered? I mean, where are these guys? The corona. You remember those? What happened to? Am I right, Cindy? I mean, where are they? They must be somewhere, right? How come they're not? Why don't they go to the hospitals? They should visit my brother in India. You see what I'm saying? The pandemic has taught me a lot of things. Faith is not transactional, it's relational. It's not name it and claim it stuff. That is not the gospel. That's another gospel. There's no cross in it. They want the crown, but they don't like the cross. But it is through suffering you enter glory. There's no other way. There's no shortcut home. There's no easy way out, right? Rocky. There's no easy way out. There's no shortcut. And the American church is famous for easy way outs and shortcut home. A lot of people are dying and they're going home. I'm now on the governing board for Word of Life Bible Institute, where I first started. And last month, we buried 3 of our heroes. Harry Ballback, Paul Buba, who's from Maine, by the way, and Steve Nichols. And now, because I'm a board member, I'm part of that stuff. Wendell Calder, who's from here, like my spiritual mentor. Sometimes he was more a tormentor. But anyway, when I think of Wendell Calder, did you know that he had bladder cancer? Did you know he had open heart surgery? Now let me ask you. Again, I understand he's old-fashioned preaching and all that, fine. Who has replaced Wendell Calder from Maine? Who? You see what I'm saying? That's why we need to train trainers. We need to mentor people. I told you over 2,000 people in India whom I know personally have died in the coronavirus. Who's replaced them? You can't go to India as a missionary. So what do? I've got to raise the next generation, right? I can't go there and live there and substitute for 2,000 people. I do some training, Zoom now. We're all screenagers. Get used to it, screenagers. I'm actually a zombie now. I'm not kidding. You have to. Any which way but win. Sounds like Clint Eastwood there. Any which way, you got to win. You've got to win souls. Win the lost at any cost. But listen, do it while we can. Here's what I've learned in the pandemic. Jesus is coming again. I'm telling you, there's nothing more that needs to happen for Jesus to come again. Are we ready? Time. Did you know every time I click my finger, every second, 4 people die and go to hell without Jesus? And out of those 4, 3 of them have never heard the gospel. They never heard it. So I tell people, don't go and preach so they'll receive Christ. At least give them one chance to reject Christ. Fair enough? Give them one opportunity to hear and say, I don't want it. They've never heard the gospel. And I've written a tract, don't call it outreach till it's focused on the unreached. If not, we're just doing the musical chairs. Why should you and I hear the gospel Sunday after Sunday after Sunday when there's people who've never heard it once? Is that fair? That's the issue of justice, not just mercy. What does mission look like? I mean, now the borders are opening up. God's been merciful to us. Have you thought of focusing on those who are not yet churched? Have you thought of going to places where they've never heard the gospel? Just let them know who Jesus is, what he's done for them. You don't even have to have apologetics and argue. And, it's only in the West, in England, in America, I've faced this ontological, teleological, cosmological, and anthropological. Most of the world's not even asking the question, prove there's a God. They're like, how do I get to know this guy? Can you do that for me? My wife needs a baby. My daughter needs a job. I mean, that's what they ask, existential questions. They're not in philosophizing, prove there's a God. How is the Bible the word? They're just reading like, wow, God said that? That's why the world is getting Christianized and Americans becoming neo-pagan. What does church look like? What does church in mission look like? They said, through much tribulation, you've got to enter the kingdom of God. What's the message we're saying? Come, you got a comfortable church. Come to Jesus, you'll be healthy. Heal all your diseases. What when the healing doesn't come? Is Jesus still Lord? What if you don't have prosperity? What if the government doesn't give you a tax exemption? Will you still give your tithes and offerings? Sometimes I wish the socialist government takes over. I don't wish that for us. But would we, what else you do to show the cost of commitment? Because we always get our perks. What's in it for me? Remember Incredibles? I like that scene where this short little manager comes to Mr. Incredible and he's giving this lady, this poor old lady, a loan. And he shouts at him, he says, well, she needed it. He says, who takes care of our needs? What's in it for me? I think we've got to lose that mentality in church. What's in it for me? We need to now look at missions as, how can I serve you? And unless we make that paradigm shift, we're not going to be missional. And notice the final thing in verse 24.
Paul and Barnabas appointed elders for them in each church, and with prayer and fasting committed them to the Lord, in whom they had put their trust.
You see, they had really not finished the job till they had replaced themselves. So technically, these guys were working their way out of because they find elders. And by the way, elders in Scripture has nothing to do with age. Well, there could be a correlation. But sometimes some older people are still childish. And some young people are so mature. I'm telling you, today, I just finished a paper on Gen Z. The generation, not even millennials. One of my daughters was a millennial. And I tell you what, she slid into that mentality. I fight 2 cultures, by the way, as a missionary. One is called dependency. You pay me, I'll do it, stuff. And that'll kill us because we're like handouts. But there's a worse culture than dependency in America. You know what it's called? Entitlement. Entitlement. You know what entitlement is? What's the least I can do and get the most out of it? Drain a system. Who destroyed Rome, by the way? Who conquered Rome? Nobody did. Rome imploded. Who's going to destroy America? America will implode because there's no moral fiber to hold us together. The unit of society is the family. What's the biggest problem in America today? It's not border control or nuclear crisis or this whole aspect of education and social and medical. You know our biggest problem? The fragmentation of the family. There won't be any glue to hold us together as a society. What does mission and ministry look like? Family. That's where it starts. Strong homes. And Paul realized you need leaders because everything either rises or falls on leadership. Check it out. That's not just a biblical principle, that's even a secular principle. Are we raising leaders who will do this? Evangelize, baptize, stabilize, and mobilize for the next generation. A few things I've learned in the pandemic that I thought I'll share with you today, give you some kind of a biblical basis. I know you're going to ask questions. I hope you do. Are we going to be high-tech at the expense of low-touch? That's a good question. People ask me that all the time. Because we're all technologically, now do we actually, it's just the opposite. I think people are loving to come back to church. Because we were made for community, right? We were made for community. Emmanuel means what? God is with us. Not me, despicable me, part 3. You can't be so privatized and individualistic. We are created for community. What does church look like? Is it going to be more structured or going to accommodate more spontaneity? Are we going to be formal? We need formality. But what about informality? You know how Starbucks was formed? You know what Starbucks is called? The third place. The guy who actually came up with the concept of the Starbucks, and he took the New Age movement symbol, but anyway, the guy who came up with the symbol for Starbucks, he said, can I create a third place that is not work and not home, where people will come and do work and feel at home? Starbucks was born. It's taking over the world, latte by latte. And you're thinking, how can we as the church improvise? People say, Dr. G, what about the pandemic? Is it a bad time? I said, it's the best time. Best time for what? The church. Why? It's time to burn the fat and build the muscle. Let me say that again. The pandemic has taught us to burn there's so much of superfluous stuff. We've learned. We don't need a lot of the stuff. We've managed, isn't it? Burn the fat. But don't forget to what? Build them. And the muscle is always those gifts that Jesus gives us. Got to build those spiritual gifts, equipment to get the job done. So these are some thoughts I want to leave with you, and I pray that you will continue to flourish. I always enjoy coming back to Bangor because 37 years ago when they had their holidays at Word of Life, I had no place to go. Of course, you couldn't imagine to fly back to your country. And that's when Wendell Calder told me God's will and said, you got to come to Maine. And I came to this camp called Living Waters. That's the only reason I come back. I don't have the time, don't need the money, don't have the energy. But I just come back because even though you develop wings, you never forget your roots. And this is where I started, in Bangor. The first church, Pastor Rocky, he was here at that time. And then took me, when I went back to India 35 years later, to plant my first church. So I'm very grateful for the I love America. This is where I got my Bible. It's the land of the free and the is it? Second part, you're all like, I don't know about that. Well, that's what we need to think about. Are we not ashamed of the gospel? We shouldn't be ashamed of the gospel. But I think we're losing. We need a whole movie called Courageous to motivate us. That's sad. We should be not ashamed. All right, here's a project, and I don't know what Pastor Kirk is going to do. I'm just going to present a project. I know what I'm going to do, and I'm going to send a Western Union next week. And I'll tell you the one cause I have on my heart for you to think about. and I'll let Pastor Kirk see how we need it. I mean, I don't need your money, trust me, but there are people who are desperate, and the American dollar goes a long way. Some of you who've been in mission know what I'm talking about. We certainly have much more than we need, don't we? Certainly much more than we deserve. So here's a set of slides, and then we'll have the rest of the time we can move around, have some more coffee if you like, or if you're into health, bring those whatever fruits. Lisa always has the health. By the way, if you're going to reach our generation, media, music, health and fitness. Did you know that? Next to automobile, the highest paid product has to do with health and fitness. I think the church should be a healthy place. And then the third and the fourth thing, whether you like it or not, with music and media and health, is actually fashion. It's very interesting. Sports and fashion are the 5 areas that the Gen Z are attracted to. I'm not saying you become that to them, but at least they should find us winsome in those areas. Okay, so this is the top of the world. Who knows the highest peak? Mount Everest, okay? And this is something I took from my plane window. You can actually have a chartered flight, and Bauda Air takes you, and it goes all the way. Yeah, brother. There you go. Is that better? You want to cut these lights? Or if you can. If not, don't worry. No, you got it brighter now. There you go. Is that better? I think this is better, right? Yeah. Can you see me, or should I smile? All right. Okay. You got to help me out after this service, man. I feel I'm going in this cancel culture, Me Too. I mean, you know what cancel culture is. Are you part of that? I'm not. Oh, okay, good. Anyway, why did I go there? So Himalayas, okay? This is Mount Everest. Mount Everest, the highest peak. Now, the reason I took this in the Annapurna Range is if you look carefully down, and you don't have to worry, here are actually people who live in the foothills. They are known as Sherpas or Gurkhas. They are mountainous people. We don't know. I mean, I took that picture and I thought, how did they get there? I mean, did they fall from heaven or what? They have goats, mountain goats, and berries, some wild berries. That's all they have. So I did some research and said, who are these people? Has the gospel gone there? I mean, that's how my mind thinks. Somebody's there. Who else has gone there? Have they taken them the gospel? Nobody has gone to that area. Next slide. With that, I started talking to the people who were educators in Nepal. And I work in 4 areas. One is called Pokhara. The other is called Chitwan, which is where the elephant park is. And then you have Kathmandu, which is the capital. So I bring them to Kathmandu because facilities are there, and I take them for a week or 2, just train them, about the Great Commission. And I ask them as couples, and I say to them, Jay Kumar and Mantri, anyone going to that place? Do you know what I'm talking about? They don't even speak a language. I said, they don't speak Nepalese? No, they speak some dialect. They don't even have a script in that dialect. So oh my goodness, I'm in big problems. And I was praying that week, Lord, would you send, this is by the way, 11 years ago, this couple that I talked to. Since then, I've built a network, I'll show you. But I'm burdened. But in that training, one young fellow, Ramu, stood up. And he said, Dr. G, I am Gurkha. I come from that tribe. My forefathers came and settled here. But I also am a Sherpa. They carry these daggers. I don't know if you've seen those Nepali daggers. And one of the rules is once you take it off, you can't put it back till you draw blood. So if they find somebody or something they have to catch and they draw it up, if they don't catch it, they literally cut themselves and put it back. It always has to be sheathed in blood. That's the Gurkha. So, by the way, who conquered Mount Everest? Who was the first one to go to Mount Everest? Sir Edmund Hillary, right? He was knighted. Later on, the Queen kind of, knighted the guy. But Edmund Hillary. But did you know he was really, there is in file of date, no proof that he went and conquered Mount Everest. Because, he did, by the way, the reason there's no picture on file is he's a British guy, and you know the cameras those days, you had to look down and take a picture. You remember that? Bill, you're old enough, you remember that. So he had this camera, and he didn't know, so he called his Sherpa. Who remembers his Sherpa?
Tenzing
Norgay
Norgay?
Tenzing Norgay. So he's a Gurkha, he's a Sherpa. So Tenzing Norgay, he usually carries all the stuff and shows him the path, right? He didn't know what to do. So Sir Edmund said, Tenzing, could you hold the Union Jack, the British flag, and stand there? So the only picture on file to prove that he went on Mount Everest is this Gurkha standing with the British flag, the Union Jack, on Mount Everest. And of course, Edmund took that picture. But you know what I love about that, Pastor Kirk? That's what mentoring is about. It's not about you being in front in your picture. It's about equipping and empowering others who will do things bigger and better than you could ever do. I really think our mission leaders should think that way. One of the reasons why young people don't emerge, the older guys don't get out of the way. I'm being honest with you. This camp that I'm coming from, Living Waters, Dorothy was asking me, Chris, so how is it? Who's in charge of the kitchen? And Mrs. Calder used to make those smorgasbord. Any of you been to Living Waters? You remember the smorgasbord? I mean, my goodness, one of my spiritual gifts is food. And I was thinking, wow, this is amazing. You can eat anything. But then they said, who's doing that? And I remember the ladies, they were in the kitchen. My goodness, they had this planned it out, and they were like, oh, there's so much missing, that's it. Now there's two young ladies, Katie and Allie, and they just run the whole thing. Just young ladies, single, while one is engaged now. Young people have tremendous potential. You know the difference between youth and old age? Did I tell you that? You see, old people, well, let me tell you about young people first. Young people have a broad mind and a narrow waist. Okay, in this Nepali couple, this Nepali couple said, you know what? You need to go, we will oversee Ramu. Next slide. I trained the guy. There he is. Certified him for church planting. Pastor Kirk's taken this DCPI. He came and got the same certification. We had it here. And you know who's there reaching those people? Ramu is. The young man. I'm telling you, the church needs young people. The next generation. That is mission. It's not just cross-cultural. It is intergenerational. And it should be intentional. You say, well, you know what? They always mess things up. Well, didn't you? Didn't I? I'll tell you the best excuse. By the time I explain how it's done, I might as well do it myself. Yeah, that's the classic. Yeah. We need to entrust it. You give them a challenge. I challenge young people. My daughter wants to go bungee jumping. You know what bungee jumping is, Jay? They put you on a rubber band and throw you off a bridge or something. She's like, Dad, I got to go bungee jumping. I'm like, say hi to Jesus. I can't believe that. And they do that like some adrenal rush or something they're looking for. And I thought to myself, if they can do bungee jumping, they can do missions, can't they? No, I'm kidding. You challenge young people. They'll take it up. We don't trust our young people. We are not intentional. And sorry if I'm bringing up too many issues today. We need to be intergenerational if we're going to reach this next generation. If not, I find a whole bunch of us old people saying that we've always done it that way till Jesus comes. So you have to bring. See, even the other day, my daughter was in church and she was, looking at the phone, and the other side, the old couple said, she needs to put away that stuff in church. She works for the Gospel Project. She's actually studying much more than the guy is talking, but she's got all this on the phone. But the mentality is she's probably watching a movie on Netflix. You see what I'm saying? That's how we think. But the young people don't think like that anymore. So we've got to, the media is the message. Maklang was right. We have to improvise. Now, I know there's the danger of the high-tech and low-touch, and they all become couch potatoes and screenagers. I understand that. But I think we also need to give them places where they can take it. This person who's reaching that group is a young man, unmarried. He's got the time, energy. Why don't you use it for missions? I can't wait to see him in my fall break and find out how he's doing. Next slide. I put this picture of Jerry and I because I took Jerry some years ago, and we went there. You know the honor they give you as a teacher? The gurus, they think we are Christian teachers or gurus. They have a tremendous respect for us. That topi they give us is a sign that we are their honored guests. They give us shawls, like Jerry shawls, and my goodness, they're all like embroidered with gold. They give us the highest honor. You know, I go to classes, even in Liberty, and they sit like this, like, try to tell me something today. And some of them even put their feet up. I go there, Ethiopia, they walk literally for 8 hours and come early to sit under a tree. They bring a little sheet so that they get a good seat in the shade. 8 hours they walk. What does it cost you to come to church tomorrow? You know what I'm saying? You say, well, it doesn't cost me much. Well, our religion is only worth how much it costs us. That's why these people are very committed. And I want to challenge you. You want honor? You're like, in America, nobody respects me. Well, go to the mission field. Be those bearers of good news, those beautiful feet that take the gospel. People are longing. And I'm not saying become full-time missionaries. At least have an exposure. Take your family. Send your kids. I guarantee you they'll come back and they'll complain less. Every time I come and say, Dad, there's not enough salt in this, or hey, this food is a little cold, or hey, how come this bed is not? She's like, Gnanakin, it's time for you to go for another mission trip. Because you come back, you're so grateful. You really are. Hot showers after Haiti. I'm like, toilets that flush. We had a sign there, when it's yellow, let it mellow, and it's brown, flush it down. And wasn't it? And then you come back home, you're like, wow. Now, sometimes we need that just to appreciate what we have. I am so honored to go every year. By the way, that's the language they speak, the Nepali language, and this is not even the language, the dialect. So now, the next slide is the big group. And I want you to see, of all this, you can see Jerry on one side and myself. And of these people, we have at least a dozen young couples who are now in my network. There's about 18 couples that I take and I support. Again, like I say, the funds I raise is not for me. Liberty pays my bills. I put food on the table. Everything people give go to people who can never afford it, but they have only 3 conditions. You got to do what others don't, won't, and can't. You've got to be a disciple maker. Not just disciple people, make disciple makers. Because you see, if I made a disciple, it stops. If you say I make a disciple maker, there's an exponential component. It has to go on. You're not a disciple maker till you made disciple makers. I can ask people in the churches, how many of you are in this church because somebody else in this church discipled you to Jesus? Very few. Most of us are here because of transfer from another. You didn't like the Sunday school, the music better, Pastor Kirk's the best preacher, and you just shunt. That's musical chairs. But when you're in a church that's smaller, you're intentional. I want to disciple somebody who's never heard of Christ, who's never been to church. And you know when new people come, isn't it? In your big church, you're like, I don't know. Even when you're dead, you're like, oh, did they die? When was that? You are really missed because you are an integral part of the missional church. And it's amazing. So one of them, and this is my last slide, one of them was Lomas. Lomas left his family in Chitwan, in Kathmandu, and he moved towards Chitwan, where the elephant park is, and those villagers and some tribal people. And he dragged his wife, Shweta, and when they started, they were just married. So I remember going there and helping him start the first church. A few people came to his house. And I said, that's fine, I'm not looking for big crowds. I teach 600 a day, so I'm not looking for a size. I'm like, bring people who want to know about Jesus. And we had 2 or 3 families, neighbors come. And it's all storytelling and oral theology. We just tell stories most of the time. And from there, he planted this church, and it was thriving. So I do the Zoom training nowadays. I should have put a slide, but the Zoom training, next slide you can see, this is Lomas, and you can see some of our clothes that we take from Goodwill from here. And we go to that village, and so they have nice clothes. They love these clothes. Of course, Goodwill, you can actually get it, where one of my daughters are into Goodwills. But it was amazing. And through the children, he reached the families, and he started a church. So 3 Saturdays ago now, he was in my training zone working. Whenever I go, he not only translates for me, he travels with me in that buses. It's crazy. I mean, it's like going to Disney World with all the rides. You should come to Asia, take a bus. My goodness, if you don't get converted, you will by the, I mean, you're like, oh, it's just amazing. So he is an example, a typical example of someone you pray and support as a church whom I invest in, not just money. They always want human resources first. You first give yourself to the gospel. Then you give your service to the people. Then you give your substance in kind, and then cash if you have to. That's the sequence of how I support. And by the way, we wean them off. We don't support them forever. We support them for 3 years. We get them started. We teach the church to support them. We wean them off. 1/3 gone. They mentor the next person. So his 1/3 goes into the other guy's startup. And that's how we create a wave. We have a movement of missions. We don't need more money. We just want to distribute it to the right places. They don't need charity. They need development, a sense of ownership. This is my ministry, not some American ministry. You see what I'm saying? So that is a classic example of Lomas. And that's when I heard on Monday that he got the COVID, and on Wednesday he died. After you work like 9 years with somebody, he's 34 years old. Now he has 2 children. One is in 6th grade. He called her Evangeline because he wants her to be an evangelist. He said, can my daughter be an evangelist? I said, she can be whatever Jesus wants her to be. Don't worry about Beth Moore and John MacArthur, whatever. Just go and gossip the gospel. And then he had a baby boy. And that baby boy, I don't know, I know it's not biblical, certainly not Christian. They thought God has eventually blessed this family because the heir will continue, his name will continue. It's pagan thinking, I know that. But their in-laws are all Hindus. That's how they think. Girl, baby, But boys, yeah, they carry the name. There's issues with female infanticide, with dowry. How many of you know what dowry is? Sati, they even kill their wives along with the husband sometimes. They burn themselves. It's bad. And that's why they need the gospel, because the culture is demonic, literally. And one of the reasons Dorothy and I stopped with 2 girls is basically to give the gospel, that our 2 girls are better than 7 boys. We stopped. We could have had more, but we wanted to make a statement. Jesus gives us girls, we love our girls. That's the way we teach our people. You don't just teach them, tell them what to do, and then you're like, oh, I do something else. You have to actually model your message. I would have loved a boy too. But Dorothy and I intentionally decided, no, we're going to make a statement to the people we know and love that our girls are precious. But anyway, the reason I'm doing this is I'm going to ask Lisa to read something off a WhatsApp and then tell you something about this. Next slide. That's his family. The last time I saw him. He is so excited because that's his young daughter, Evangeline, who reads and writes and everything. And that's that boy who's now just 1 year old. And Sweta is going through a tremendous crisis. Again, please take this in the right sense. She went through what they call in counseling a shock stage. She doesn't believe her husband's dead. Then they go through denial. And there's no way this could happen to me. And one of the things that happened during this stage is that she was so burdened. She kept calling and she just kept crying. And I didn't know what to tell her and how to answer her. But I'll just ask Lisa to read this WhatsApp that she sent me 2 weeks ago. The English is not good because it's not her language. Listen to this. Yeah, you could just read that, Ma. I don't know if it becomes bigger, does it?
Bigger. If not, I have have
Yeah.
glasses. I need to get my glasses. I can't read it.
Okay. I was in a meeting with one of my leaders, and I asked him, I said, Henry, would you like to come forward and present? He said, Dr. G, do I need to come forward? I said, people hear you better. He said, I'm at a stage in life that every part in my body that works hurts. Go ahead, Lisa. Yeah. Listen to this. This is Sweta's voice, and I'd like Pastor to pray for her. And then after our meeting today, the Q&A time, we're going to ask if you want to designate or give a gift. This week I go back on Monday. I go to Western Union, and we're going to get Sweta. By the way, it's very vulnerable. If she remains in that place without a husband, she'll be raped. I mean, that's what it is. There's no doubt about it. And they're villagers. They just think she's very vulnerable. So we've talked to Prakash. Some of you know Prakash and Amrita, who came to Bangor Baptist, I think, from Nepal. So I put them in touch with another pastor closer to her sister. So we're going to move her from this place for some time to be with a Christian pastor and his wife, and also relocate her house from that. And so whatever we give this morning, I mean, God's going to provide all that she needs, I'm pretty sure. But whatever you give will go directly to help this person who has been part of our prayer and support. Now she's a widow, and here's what she asks.
Greetings in the name of the Lord. Why God took good people early age? Why God made beautiful family and destroyed like this? Am I bad, unlucky person? That's why God has given me this punishment, and also is this cursed? Lona's grandfather died in his early age. His father died early age, now my Lona's. I have seen many people suffering from like curse. I am disappointed with God.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah. I don't know, any of you like to answer that? It's not easy, isn't it? Pastoring is not easy. We don't have flippant answers to give. That's why we need to journey with them. It's hard. No, we can be independent, care about ourselves. I don't have COVID, that's fine. I'm working on my 501(c)(3), I mean, yeah, but there must be more to life, isn't it? For me, this is what missions is about. So I'm here to say thank you for the many of you who pray for what we do what others don't, won't, and can't. We make disciple makers. We go into countries that have limited access or no gospel, and I work among the church that's persecuted. So that's the don't, won't, and can't. And if you've been to Laos or North Korea, you can't if you're an American. That's what we do. We go do what others can't. And we go among those who've never heard about Jesus. So thank you so much. We'll take a coffee. I think it's time. Is it 10 o'clock? Yeah? All right, we take have some coffee, just grab something or stretch yourself, and another 10, 15 minutes we'll close. Is that okay?